Welcome, dear friends, and let me spin you a tantalizing tale of love, loyalty, betrayal, and the unbreakable bonds that truly make a family. Enjoy the story. John Hanson steered his sleek BMW down the familiar streets of his hometown of Oakville, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts. The 32-year-old hotshot entrepreneur was finally taking a much-needed break from his hectic life in New York City to visit his parents for the holidays. As the tidy suburban homes and manicured lawns flashed by, John felt the stresses of his high-stakes business dealings start to melt away. He pulled into the driveway of his parents' modest split-level home and turned off the engine. Gazing up at the window, he spotted the friendly face of his mother, Linda, peeking out from behind the curtain. A smile spread across John's chiseled features. No matter how far he went in life, coming back here always felt like returning to his roots. John popped the trunk and began unloading his designer suitcases and a stack of carefully wrapped presents. Just then, the front door swung open and out bounded his father, Robert, a spry 65-year-old with an easy grin. "Johnny, what a surprise!" Robert exclaimed, pulling his son into a tight bear hug. "We weren't expecting you for a few more hours." John laughed, patting his dad on the back. "I couldn't wait any longer to come home. It's been too long, Pop." Together they hauled John's things inside as Linda waved enthusiastically from the window. The comforting smells of a home-cooked meal wafted out, enveloping John like a warm blanket. His mother's cooking was second to none. "This is absolutely delicious, Ma," John praised, shoveling forkfuls of fluffy scrambled eggs into his mouth. "No five-star restaurant could ever top your famous breakfast spread." Linda beamed with pride as she refilled his coffee mug. "Nothing's too good for my baby boy, even if he did show up out of the blue," she teased. The three Hansons tucked into the hearty brunch of eggs, bacon, pancakes, and fresh fruit. For a little while, John was able to forget all about the troubles brewing back in the big city, especially the sneaking suspicion that someone close to him was trying to sabotage his business deals. He shook off the uneasy feeling, determined to enjoy this quality time with his family. "You're looking a bit peaked, dear," Linda remarked, studying John's face. "I hope you're not working yourself too hard." "I'm fine, Ma, really," John assured her. "Just haven't been sleeping that great lately. That's all." Robert chuckled. "Welcome to adulthood, son. Why don't you go upstairs and catch a nap? We'll keep the leftovers warm for you." John pushed back from the table and stretched. A nap did sound pretty good right about now. "I think I'll take you up on that," he agreed. "Wake me in a couple hours?" The crisp December air nipped at John's nose as he strolled through the quaint downtown streets. Twinkling Christmas lights sparkled overhead, lending a festive glow to the shop windows. He zipped his leather jacket against the chill, drinking in the nostalgic sights and sounds of his youth. A flash of color caught John's eye and he turned to see a small booth set up on the corner. The sign read, "Madame Natalie's Mystical Fortunes." Intrigued, John approached the young, pretty woman perched on a stool. "Come, come," she beckoned, her bangles jangling. "Let Madame Natalie glimpse your future, for a small price." Amused, John fished a $20 bill from his wallet and handed it over. What could it hurt to indulge in a little light-hearted fun? He extended his palm, and Natalie traced the lines with a gnarled fingertip, humming to herself. Suddenly, her cloudy eyes widened and she gasped. I see great purpose in your immediate future, young man. You will unexpectedly save an innocent life today, and in doing so, you will gain a new loyal friend who will never betray you." John laughed off the dramatic prediction and thanked Natalie for the reading, but as he continued on his way, her words echoed in his mind. Save a life? Gain a loyal friend? It all sounded pretty far-fetched. Lost in thought, John almost didn't notice the commotion happening across the street. A burly man, clearly drunk, was yelling and cursing as he wielded a stick. John squinted, trying to make out the target of the man's rage. Then he saw it, a tiny, defenseless puppy, cowering against the wall. Without hesitation, John sprinted towards the scene, his blood boiling. "Hey!" he shouted. "Leave that dog alone!" The drunk man turned, sneering at John with glazed eyes. "Mind your own business, pretty boy," he slurred, raising the stick again. John lunged forward and grabbed the man's wrist, twisting until he dropped the weapon with a yelp. Get out of here before I call the cops, John growled. The man staggered away, muttering obscenities under his breath. Heart pounding, John knelt down and scooped up the trembling puppy. It's okay, little guy, he murmured. I've got you now. Let's get you checked out, huh? As he cradled the tiny dog against his chest, Madame Natalie's words flashed through his mind once more. Could she have been right after all? Rise and shine, Johnny boy, Robert's voice boomed, startling John awake. Time to hit the lake for some fishing, just like old times. John groaned and rolled over, burying his face in the pillow. After rescuing the puppy, now affectionately named Graff after his grandfather, and taking him to the emergency vet, it had been well past midnight by the time he'd gotten to bed. Come on, Pop. The fish will still be there in a couple more hours, he grumbled. Nonsense, Robert insisted. The early bird gets the trout. Now move your keister before I drag you out by your ear. Knowing resistance was futile, John hauled himself up and began getting dressed. 20 minutes later, father and son were bumping along the dirt road in Robert's ancient pickup truck, fishing poles rattling in the back. I've been thinking, Robert mused as he pulled up to their favorite spot on the lake's edge. How about we make things a bit more interesting with a little wager? John raised an eyebrow. Oh, what did you have in mind? If you catch more fish than your old man, I'll finally let you buy me that newfangled car you've been yapping about, Robert proposed. But if I win, you have to promise to spend New Year's here with your ma and me. No last-minute business trips. You're on, John agreed, already plotting. He loved his dad fiercely, but the man's stubborn pride meant he'd never accept a new vehicle outright, unless he lost a bet fair and square. As they cast their lines and settled in to wait, John discreetly released a few fish when Robert's back was turned. Spending the holidays with his family and getting his dad into a safer, more reliable car, there was no downside. That evening, while Robert and Linda watched a movie, John snuck out to pay Madame Natalie another visit. He found her packing up her fortune-telling booth, humming an exotic melody. I had a feeling you'd be back, she said with a knowing smile. The fates work in mysterious ways, do they not? About that, John began, cutting to the chase. Your prediction came true. And now I have a business proposition for you. Natalie cocked her head, intrigued. I'm listening. John took a deep breath. The saboteur I mentioned, the one trying to ruin my business, I need your help to smoke them out. Come to New York, pose as my fiancé at my next big meeting. While you're there, see what you can sniff out with your, mystical insights. And in return? Natalie prompted. I'll pay you handsomely, John promised. 10 grand plus all expenses paid. What do you say? Madame Natalie considered for a long moment, then broke into a sly grin. I say you've got yourself a deal, Mr. Hanson. When do we begin? The opulent conference room at Hanson Enterprises was a buzz of activity, every seat filled with John's top executives and key investors. The air hummed with a mixture of anticipation and tension as the fate of the company hung in the balance. Natalie, a vision of sophistication in her form-fitting Gucci dress and towering Manolo Blahnik heels, worked the room like a seasoned pro. She laughed at all the right jokes, touched arms with just the right amount of flirtation, and exuded an aura of charm that had the men eating out of the palm of her hand. But beneath her dazzling smile and sparkling eyes, Natalie's mind was razor-sharp, attuned to every nuance and undercurrent in the room. As the meeting droned on, the conversation inevitably turned to the elephant in the room, the string of high-profile deals that had inexplicably fallen through at the 11th hour, costing the company millions. John's right-hand man and CFO, Steve Markham, shook his head with a heavy sigh. His usually immaculate suit looked rumpled, as if he'd slept in it, and dark circles underscored his bloodshot eyes. It's a damn shame, he said, his voice rough with exhaustion. That tech startup acquisition was a game-changer. We were so close to closing the deal, and then, poof, just like all the others. Natalie saw her moment and struck with the precision of a viper. Funny you should mention that, Steve, she purred, her voice dripping with saccharine venom. Because according to my sources, you're the one who's been sabotaging these deals. And not just for kicks, but to line the pockets of that gold-digging girlfriend of yours. A stunned silence blanketed the room, so thick you could hear a pin drop. Every eye swiveled to Steve, whose face had gone ashen. He opened and closed his mouth like a fish gasping for air, his hands trembling as he gripped the edge of the table. I don't know what you're talking about, he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. Natalie, you're way out of line here. But it was too late. Candace, Steve's girlfriend, shot up from her chair like a bottle rocket, her pretty features twisted with rage. You idiot! She screeched, her voice shrill enough to shatter glass. I told you to keep your damn mouth shut. Now look what you've done. In a whirlwind of clicking Louboutins and a cloud of cloying perfume, Candace snatched up her Birkin bag and stormed out of the room, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. Steve seemed to deflate before their very eyes, slumping back in his chair like a puppet with its strings cut. He couldn't even bring himself to meet John's piercing gaze. Tom Jennings, John's other trusted confidant, gaped at the scene in utter disbelief. His craggy face was etched with lines of shock and betrayal. Steve, man, how could you? He asked, his voice rough with emotion. After everything we've been through, all the years of friendship, how could you do this to John, to the company? John held up a hand, his expression grim but controlled. Though his eyes blazed with fury, his voice remained steady. We'll deal with the fallout later, he said, his tone brooking no argument. For now, we need to focus on damage control and moving forward. This meeting is adjourned. As the shell-shocked executives filed out of the room, murmuring amongst themselves, Natalie turned to John with a self-satisfied smirk. Well, looks like my work here is done, she drawled, examining her perfectly manicured nails. I trust you'll honor our agreement? John gave a curt nod, his jaw clenched tight. A deal's a deal, he ground out. The money will be in your account by morning. He paused, and for a moment, his stern facade cracked, revealing a glimmer of vulnerability. And Natalie, thank you. I couldn't have done this without you. Natalie's smile softened, becoming something almost genuine. Don't mention it, handsome, she murmured, giving his arm a gentle squeeze. That's what partners are for. 1 year later. John, if you don't stop pacing, you're going to wear a hole in the floor, Natalie chided gently, rubbing her swollen belly. John paused his restless movements and ran a hand through his hair. I can't help it, Nat. What if something goes wrong? What if… Darling, relax, Natalie soothed. Women have been giving birth since the dawn of time. Our little one and I will be just fine. Just then, a familiar face poked into the private hospital suite. Knock, knock, Steve called tentatively. I hope I'm not interrupting. Steve! John crossed the room and pulled his old friend into a hug. I'm so glad you could make it. And perfect timing. I'm in no state to drive us to the hospital myself. Steve chuckled. Happy to be of service. And might I add, fatherhood suits you, John. I've never seen you so… frazzled. John made a face at him as he grabbed Natalie's hospital bag. Yeah, yuck it up. We'll see who's laughing when it's your turn, wise guy. As the trio made their way out to the car, Graf the dog trotting happily at their heels, John marveled at the twists and turns his life had taken in just 1 short year. He'd gained a wife, a child, a pet, and had even managed to sniff out a traitor in his midst, with a little help from a very special fortune-teller. Steve, to his credit, had been repentant and willing to pay his dues. Slowly but surely, he'd earned back John's trust, and their friendship was now stronger than ever. Funny how life had a way of coming full circle. As for Natalie, John knew he'd never have met her if not for that chance encounter on the street corner. And now, she was his everything, his partner, his soulmate, the mother of his child. Fate worked in mysterious ways, indeed. All right, let's get this show on the road, John declared, helping Natalie into the passenger seat. Next stop, Parenthood. As Steve pulled out of the driveway, John reached over and squeezed Natalie's hand. I love you, he murmured. Both of you. Natalie smiled back at him, her eyes shining with emotion. We love you too, John. More than anything. And with that, they sped off towards their next great adventure, as a family. Come what may, they would face it all together, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, till death did them part. Because that's what true love was all about. Loyalty, devotion, and the courage to stand by each other's side no matter what life threw their way. John and Natalie had found that in each other, and they knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that they would continue to choose each other every single day for the rest of their lives. As the hospital loomed into view, John felt a sense of peace wash over him. No matter what challenges lay ahead, he had everything he needed right here in this car: his wife, his child, his best friend, and his faithful furry companion. With their love and support, he could take on the world, and he would, for them and for the beautiful future they were building together.
Alright, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, "I'm thirsty." Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. "I don't care what they say, I plan to quit any time," he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. "To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance." As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. "Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them." It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. "Still here?" Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. "I'm leaving." I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick, what's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike. What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that?" "Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here." "He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.